I've gone back and forth a few times trying to decide whether or not we should, try to follow the order of the Siddur and go in some specific order, which has obvious benefits. But I keep coming back to not wanting to do that. I want each session to sort of be its own thing. That obviously, if you come to more than one, we'll start to make connections from one session to the next. But that if you just happened to be here tonight and that was it, like it wouldn't hinge on knowing what we had done last time specifically. And I kind of, they have like deconstructed niçoise salad, where like all the pieces are on the plate, but they're not mixed together.
Yes.
Right. I feel like that culinary model is actually necessary in our Siddur life. We need a kind of an unsedered Siddur. We need to approach the Siddur not as the whole thing, start, page 1 to page 100, because that's just too big a bite. And part of the method, my pedagogy in the masterclass, is to do what they call iyun tefillah. Iyun, the Hebrew word is ayin yud vav nun, iyun, which means just to look closely in. It comes from like ayin, lehit anyen, to become interested in something, le'ayin, and it means instead of like a broad approach, you have a deep approach. Iyun means let's get into the nitty-gritty details. So that's kind of the approach I have. And so there's going to be some connection between the pieces, but we're not going to follow the order of the Siddur. And in part on purpose, and in part because I just think it's more engaging, both for me as a teacher and for you as students. So last week we looked at the Song of the Sea, and I mentioned when we started that it's one of the specifically quoted pieces from the Torah that's in the Siddur. A lot of the Siddur is written by rabbis much later than the biblical period, but the Az Yashir is straight out of the Torah. It's lifted and put into the Siddur. We even reprint it in the same way that it's written in the Torah scroll, right? It's a very Torah-itic experience. And our text tonight is a similar one. It's but much more central. So we're going to look at the Shema. And the truth is the Shema deserves more than one session. There are people who've written, whole books about the Shema. And we could take really a wide variety of approaches. There's halacha about the Shema, how you are supposed to say it, when you are supposed to say it, how often you are supposed to say it. And we'll look at a little bit of that. But there's really volumes of that stuff. I mean, we couldn't fit it into one session, even if we just focused on the halachic aspects. The Shema we could look at the Shema as a sort of prototypical prayer, because it's one of the tefillot that's independently obligatory. You have an obligation to say the Shema that's sort of independent from the broader obligation to praise God through prayer. So, and we'll see in the words of the Shema, B'shoch becha, when you lie down, Uvekumecha, when you rise up. Welcome, Ruth. And so there are articulated times when we have to say the Shema, and the Shema itself articulates some of those times. And in a way, the Shema is used as an example of tefillah in a number of different places. It's the paradigm. For example, the Talmud uses the Shema to ask the question about whether or not you need kavanah, intention, to fulfill a mitzvah. And here's one of the examples they give. You're walking past the synagogue early in the morning, and you happen to hear them chant the Shema. You're outside walking down the street, but you happen to hear the people in the synagogue chanting the Shema. Have you fulfilled the mitzvah of recalling the Shema in the morning and in the evening? Well, you didn't really do it, right? You just sort of walked by it. You didn't really intend to do it. Is just hearing it enough? And they don't ask that about other things. They don't say that about the Ashrei or about the Az Yashir. They say it about the Shema because the Shema has its own independent weight. Sometimes people will, if they literally don't have time for anything else, they say the Shema. Like that's sort of the minimum of the minimum of the minimum. If you had to get on the bus and you had to say your prayers right before you could say the Shema and fulfill at least a measure of your daily obligation in that way. And I think the Shema has a kind of cultural panache in Judaism. It's one of our Hall of Fame tefillot. Everybody knows it. If you went into any synagogue, Reform, Reconstructionist, Orthodox, Chabad, Haredi, Monsey, New York, wherever you are, any, you went into the lefty of the most lefty Jewish renewal synagogues. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you. You're frozen. Or I've got you frozen.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
You're
that's frustrating.
You are frozen.
That's frustrating. And you just stood up in front of everybody and said the Shema. Everybody in the whole place would sing along with you. Little kids know the Shema, and we say it every night before bed. It's like a nighttime ritual. Parents and children, it's like one of the first repetitive rituals a kid ever experiences. It's in every mezuzah and every pair of tefillin. It has a kind of ubiquitous, like I said, it's the Hall of Fame tefillah. It's the big one. Some people consider it the sort of the Jewish creed, right? We don't have what Protestants call a doxology, right? A declaration of here are the things we believe. Or a proclamation of our faith. Behold, I am a believer, right? We just don't have that. But maybe the Shema is that. You shall love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might, and these words will be central to you, and you will teach them to your children. You'll perpetuate this all day, all night, intergenerational. You'll affix them permanently to your life. And onto the doors of your household. It's pretty foundational. Let's also remember that Shema, we say Shema every night. And at the vidui, at the end of someone's life, really the last thing that they say is the Shema in your life. A praying Jew says the Shema is like the departing words if they can speak. So wow, we haven't even talked about the words itself, right? And already, like, what an incredible thing. It's truly a remarkable piece. And I want us to think about the Shema in a couple of different structural ways. One is just those 6 words. I would contend it's pretty hard to say just those 6 words with a lot of intense meaning. To know what they really mean, to understand the connotations and reverberations of the words Yisrael and Adonai Eloheinu, you sort of have to be a knowledgeable Jew to really get what all the connotations of those words are. But those 6 words would, I think, that's the minimal Shema, right? The most simplest. And then we, of course, have the Ve'ahavta, that first paragraph. If you have the Siddur, we're on page 155. I will share in the screen here. Hang on. You know that this is on our website, that you can go to the website and find the Siddur Lev Shalem right here. There we go. So I'm on page 155. So another way to think of the Shema is the Shema and the first paragraph, the Shema and the Ve'ahavta. And then we can also think of it as all 3 of the paragraphs, Ve'ahavta, V'haya im shamoa, and Vayomer Adonai, all 3 of those paragraphs on page 155 and 156. Any comments, anything you want to chime in? Say, ask questions up to this point before we jump into the words itself. No? Okay, let's see everybody. Hold on here. All
So,
right, good.
so Rabbi, when they say,
Yeah.
when you say you're supposed, you should say it during the day, does that mean you should say the whole thing, all paragraphs, or just the first?
Right. So that's an excellent question. There are some tefillot where how you say it in the morning is different than how you say it in the evening. For example, in the Amidah, we sometimes say Sim Shalom, and we sometimes say Shalom Rav. Sim Shalom in the mornings, and Shalom Rav in the evenings. The Shema is said at Shachrit, in the Shachrit service, and it's said in Mariv, or at bedtime in the evening. It's not actually when you wake up and when you lie down. The Talmud discusses specifics about the timing. It means in the time when people wake up, meaning the morning time, and in the time when people go to bed, meaning the evening time. Because what if you don't get up then, right? It's not about your individual experience. It's more a you, the plural you. When you lie down, when you humans, right? When people tend to get up. We mean the Shema, those 6 words, and the 3 paragraphs, all 3 paragraphs. And part of the reason for that is, one of the things we'll see is, pay attention to these 3 words here. I don't know if you ever noticed that. Okay, we're going to talk about those 3 words. that you say in the absence of the minyan. And we're going to talk about these 3 words when there is a minyan. I don't know if you ever noticed that stuff, right? But there's like a secret code in the Siddur that's written in those little red letters that you kind of have to know all the stuff what that's all about. I do like our Siddur because it kind of explains it sometimes, why that is and why things are, why you add certain things. And you'll see this does that in the God is a faithful sovereign note right here. Right? So the Shema and its 3 paragraphs are a unit. Okay, and let's not forget that these are straight out of the Bible. This is Deuteronomy 6. This is Deuteronomy 11, and this is Numbers 15. These are the 3 places where it talks about placing these words in your house and on your body, et cetera, et cetera.
Rabbi,
Yes.
am I mistaken, but the Dalit at the end of Echad, isn't that usually bigger and bolder?
Yes. So, okay, hold on a second. We can start because this is it. Not only that, but it has to do also with what is kind of an error in the way people say things, and it's the kind of thing that rabbis try to talk about, but that we aren't always totally effective at because. Remember the movie Inception, right? An idea is really hard to dislodge. It's very hard to dislodge bad ideas that have established themselves over generations. They just become the new normal. And unless you can reprogram everybody, it's really tough. If you look here, you see that? Yeah, you see how the ayin and the dalit are larger? Did that come through at all? Yeah? No. In some Siddurim, you will see that the ayin in the Shema, the last letter of Shema, and the dalit, the last letter of Echad, are made larger. And that's a reference to the biblical text. That's true in scrolls, you will find it written that way. That's an old tradition about the way the scroll is written. And it the word that it spells, ayin and dalid, is the word aid, which is the Hebrew word for witness or testimony. And so it's as if we are testifying to God's oneness, which after all it is the primary teaching of Judaism. If I had to say what the big philosophical, religious underpinning of Judaism is, I don't mean Hillel's teaching, the golden rule, because that's also true. I mean, what's our philosophy? Our philosophy is that the universe is a universe, that the world is one, humanity is one, we are all one because God is one. There you go. I think that's a very powerful concept. And it is our testimony. Am Yisrael, the Jewish people, our continued existence, our very being, is a living testimony to the oneness of God. That's why we're here. It's why we do all of this. So that the world might know that God is one. And since God is one, we, God's children, are one. Okay, let's go back to the text. I think I took a little detour there. The Shema is, the custom is to say the beginning of the Shema. By the way, we say this every day, twice a day. Weekdays, Yom Tov, holidays, Shabbat, Yom Kippur, doesn't matter. The Shema is a part of every day's liturgy. The custom is to sort of cover your eyes when you say the Shema, because it's about Shema, it's about hearing and listening. And you see a lot of people do this. I'm not sure what the origin of that custom is, but it's a very widespread custom, long-standing custom. And I do think in our inner experience, we really should try to close our eyes and pay more attention to our hearing. When we say Shema, to hear and to feel the vibration of our voice, to hear the other people, to close our eyes. As we will say just a few sentences down here, that we might not be seduced by our eyes, as they may lead us astray. It turns out seeing is wonderful, but it comes with some flip sides. And seeing is very deceptive. It's the number one way we are tricked and fooled. And honestly, if you really dig in deep into what the act of seeing actually is, it turns out to be a lot less about what light comes into your eyes and a lot more about how you are interpreting things and how your bias informs you about what you see. It's not actually what you see, it's what you interpret. So the Shema is an opportunity to close your eyes. And I encourage that. When we do that, the idea is not to rush through it. It's not to say, Shema, Yisrael, Adonai, Eloheinu, Adonai, Echad. No. Some things you can rush, but this is meant to be heard. And I don't know if y'all know this. This is an important aspect of tefillah, is the relative speed between seeing and hearing. I'm going to take a little detour. Which is faster, neurologically speaking? We're talking microseconds, but which is faster, seeing or hearing? Seeing. Much faster. Much, much, much faster. For example, if you and I are traveling down the highway in opposite directions, 70 miles an hour, and we happen to pass each other, going opposite directions at 70 miles an hour, and I look left and you look left, and we see each other, you will recognize me almost immediately. You won't have to process through your head, wait, those eyes, that glasses, the beard, oh, that's Rabbi Norry. No, it's almost instantaneous. You see it, and you've already processed it very, very quickly, as opposed to you're listening to me speak. You have to hear it. It has to go in through auditory nerves, has to be processed through a whole different part of your brain, interpreted. The words have to be understood. It's a whole different part of our brain. It's why if I speak too quickly, you can't really follow what I'm saying. And if my sermons don't have a little pause here now and then, you'll get lost and you'll stop paying attention to them. Because it takes a lot longer. That, by the way, turns out to be influential in how we learn certain things. We learn certain things by seeing and other things by hearing. And a great deal of moral learning is done auditorially. You learn a lot about ethics and morals and the humanity side as a young child growing up from what you hear, even more than from what you see, because it operates more slowly in our brain. It's a slow cooker. So closing your eyes and paying careful attention to the sound of the words actually slows down your brain function and the way you experience and process that moment. Changes the gear and the speed. So it's kind of important to close your eyes on occasion in tefillah, and this is one of them. And to say the Shema, whether you're the leader or singing along, in a relatively slower pace, not too dramatically slow. I've seen some places where they do Shema Yisrael. I can see the value. I can, but that's not what I'm advocating. Although I do think on occasion that could be very actually beneficial to try to really slow things down. But I mean just to go at a more natural, slow pace and allow the words to clearly and articulately form in your mouth. And that this is after all the warm-up of Psukei de Zimra and the early part of Shachrit, there's hitting a certain slower stride as we go into the main part of the Tefillah, the Shema and the Amidah. So we say, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Now there is actually, Sue, I think it was you who asked about the Dalit, right? So there's a custom of articulating the Dalit clearly. And this is one of those things where balance is really important and where dogmatic attitudes about things like this really get in our way. The word echad is very similar to the Hebrew word acher. Dalit and Reish, right? Here's a Reish, Israel, here's a Dalit. The only real difference is that tiny little notch at the edge of the Dalit, right? They're very, very similar letters. So you might mistakenly read this as Adonai Acher. There's another God. In all my years, nobody's done that. Okay, so I don't know how realistic that is, but all right, whatever. Let's accept it as legit. So you want to be sure to say all the words correctly. And this is a moment when we're going to talk about the need for precision. In davening, I don't mean to get like all, type A and pedantic, but precision is really important. It's important in almost everything you do. Now, having said that, it's not always important, but usually the ability to be precise elevates your creative, spiritual, or athletic experience. So we want to say each word correctly. We don't want to say Adonai Echad, where the end kind of trails off, and maybe you could be heard wrong. Or to say, no, a million times no. You want to articulate the words, and you want to say Adonai Echad. You want to say it clearly. What you don't want to do is over-exaggerate. Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. You'll hear people do that. Don't do that, because it's not precise. The point is to know about it and to be careful in your articulation, not to change the word and to over exaggerate. I know I always give the martial arts analogies, but the precision one just requires me to say, like in martial arts, especially in a high level in martial arts, the higher up you go, the more we start to emphasize precision. When you're a white belt, yellow belt, if you're not that precise, it's okay. Right? We're working on basics. You don't need to be that precise. Get the basics down. We'll refine things a little later. But as you move up, little mistakes start to become unacceptable. And you can't have your hand like this. You have to have your hand like this all together. And your fingers really, so that all this is straight across. And this, not over here, right, but here. And you have to have that every single time. It's got to be precise. Because, this, no good. Loose fingers, no good. Tight fingers, all correct. Every single time. And the value of that is that it eliminates slack in the flow of the energy that you have. When you say Adonai Echad and overemphasize things like that, or when you become overly pedantic, or when you don't care enough about the precision of the language and the pronunciation, it's like bad grammar in writing. It detracts from the flow of the creativity and the good energy of good writing. Someone's going to pay attention to the poor construction of the language rather than paying attention to the good writing. And you, as the performer, as the demonstrator, as the davener, you're going to be giving energy to things which are extraneous, tafel in Hebrew. These are chaff. And they get in the way. They're distraction. So I encourage you to have a balanced sense of precision. Right? It's not about over dramatizing something. It's about understanding and having a balanced, precise flow to it. And heck, that's just within the first 6 words. Okay, now, the second line of the Shema is recited silently. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on the history of that and on the midrash of that, but it's added there as a balance to the Shema, and we whisper it because it's something which the angels say. The classics pose this as the response of the angels, and since we're not angels, we say it quietly. Baruch, praise, Shem Kevod, Malchuto, the holy, blessed name of God's sovereignty, forever and ever. It's a coronation. A lot of the tefillah can be thought of as a declaration of God as king, a coronation of God. And I always like what Israel Salanter says. He says, it's easy to declare God king of the universe. It's a lot more difficult to declare God king of you. So we're looking to, say, okay, we have a priority place for God in our life. The coronation of God means we recognize our subservience to, that there is a categorical difference between who and what we are and what God is. Okay, now we get into the paragraphs. And by far, the most recognized one is the first one. Because it's, and it's almost iconic. Most people who are regular daveners have probably memorized it. As opposed to the second paragraph, which you'd be hard pressed to find your regular old Jew in the pew who's memorized that second paragraph. And some of these words repeat, so the paragraphs sort of blur together a little bit. But they do have very clear, distinct overall tone to them. And they do have a distinctiveness. So you're supposed to kind of walk through a set of experiences in recitation here that are not, it's not all one long paragraph, it's three distinct paragraphs. We say this one along with the trope. The markings from the Torah, and you can see them here. Will this let me zoom in here? It's not let me zoom. Zoom in. There we go. Oh, too much. There's too much. Oops, sorry about that. I'm going to leave it alone. The marks here in the book are both the vocalization marks, right? The nikudot, which tell you how to read the word, and especially the ones on the top are Torah trope. So the way we sing it in synagogue is the way it's chanted out of the Torah. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha bechol levavcha uvechol nafshecha uvechol meodecha. You can hear the end of the sentence, right? There's only 4 sentences here. Vehayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi metzavecha hayom al levavecha. You hear the end of the sentence. Veshinantam levanecha vedibarta bam beshiftecha bebeitecha uvelechtecha baderech uvshochbecha uvkumecha ukshartam leot al yadecha vehayu letotachot ein einecha uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha uviyarecha. There's not a lot of places where we read the tefillah like we read out of the Tanakh. And so this one is, it's a big one. It's central. And in a way, it's again, it ties back to the childhood pedagogy, how we teach this very, very early on. It's foundational concepts. It's basic things. It's about mezuzah and tzitzit and tefillin, things that kids see, touch, recognize, right? Objects. It's object lessons. And it accustoms your ear to the reading of the Torah. All right, I'm going to pause here. We'll talk about the next two paragraphs in a second and the end, but I want to give a chance for questions, comments, reactions, anything.
I have a question with that paragraph, doing it in trope. So is that custom? Is that, I mean, how much emphasis? What I'm saying is, like, our day school now is mostly davening with Chabad. So they don't do that trope. They do a different V'ahavta.
What do they do?
V'ahavta Adonai Elohecha. No.
They just have a regular old melody.
They just have one that they do it to. I'm bad. I can't sing and I don't have an ear, but it's different. So like if I go in and I daven with them and I start with this, well, we've had this for years with when you teach kids a different, something that they're not as familiar with, they fight you on it. So,
it's different and therefore we will fear it and reject it.
And so I just never knew how much emphasis for myself. I didn't have a reason. I mean, I know that it's written in trope. I also know that the trope that they sing at Emmanuel is different than the trope we sing at Bethel a little bit. It's every chazan has a little different trope. So does it, I know we do it that way because I guess because it's easy to teach it that way, but is that why we're doing it? Or is there a stronger reason that I would push it?
No, I don't think so. I think it's a very widespread custom, but it is just a custom.
But it's a custom.
It's a custom,
Okay.
And you're right that there's not one universal trope. There's a variety of different tropes, and
I've just been, I live with someone who says this is the right way to do it when you daven certain things. And I never know whether it's the custom to do it this way or there's a right and a wrong.
This one is a custom.
Okay.
And you know that it, by the way, because we don't say the first 6 words with the trope. We don't say,
Right.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. No, we have our own melody, right? Just like, so it's, you can
It's
have
just a
melody.
widely accepted.
I suspect it's either like a specific Chabad melody kind of thing that's widespread, or it's a pedagogical thing. Like this is a fun melody, and so we do it with kids because it's catchy and kids can sing it. Right.
Yeah.
All of which are perfectly good reasons.
Okay.
It raises the broader philosophical question, which I think as a shul that is in transition, you ought to be thinking about is what is the weight that we're going to give to custom?
Yeah.
Right? Custom is not something that you're just like, well, if it's just a custom, throw it away. No. That, first of all, that's not the halachic approach, right? The halachic approach is to grant weight to custom. Case law also counts. So precedent also counts in law. So local custom is important. Minhag hamakom, the way that a certain place does something, does carry some weight. But if it were so compelling that precedent were always what you had to do, nothing would ever change. And we'd still be, walking around in sandals and writing on papyrus. So we're not doing that. So things do change. And custom is just that. It's just custom. And it can consciously be set aside and changed.
Thank you.
Any others? Comments, questions? So let's look at the second two paragraphs here a little bit. I just want to mention a few things linguistically. Things in the Hebrew that repetition in the tefillah is a philosophical return to important points. It's not just to say it over and over and over again. That's a common misunderstanding. Saying it over and over again has certain benefits to it. So for example, here's the words shamoa, tishmeu. If you will hear, and shemoa, tishmeu, and listen to, meaning obey, et mitzvotai, le'ahava. So we have the words Shema here. And we have ahava, ve'ahavta, to love God. Ule'avdo, right? Bechol levavechem u'bechol nafshechem. Again, very similar language to the previous paragraph. But it does have some very specific differences. And this paragraph introduces the idea of, well, a kind of reward and punishment. And it's a difficult concept for a lot of people, but it's definitely a part of classical Judaism and a part of tefillah, an important part of tefillah, is to encounter ancient ideas. You do not have to like them all. It is not about liking them. It is about encountering them, understanding them, striving to understand them and to not dismiss them. So we read, and we used to, at night, our first child, Natanya, used to like it when Joanna would sing to her the English in mock Torah trope, because Natanya didn't understand all the Hebrew, but she loved the English because, well, as you'll see, it talks about your cattle and your grass and the rain and the wine, and she just thought that it talks about your cows was wonderful. So Joanna would sing things like, you shall gather in your grain and wine and oil, and I will provide grass in your fields for your cattle, and you shall eat and shall be satisfied. Take care lest your heart be tempted, and you shall stray and serve other gods, bow down to them. Then Adonai's anger will flare up against you, and God will close up the sky so that there will be no rain, and the earth will not yield its produce. You will quickly disappear from the land, the good land that God has given you. Therefore, impress these words of mine upon your heart and upon your soul. Nice, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's I think it's important to read the English. This is an important idea here. The idea that our behavior matters to God, and that there is karma, that good things come to you. And again, it reminds us to impress these words and bind them on our hands and on our eyes, and to teach them to our children by speaking of them. We're supposed to talk about the Shema with our children, both when we are at home and when we go away, in the hours when we lie down and when we rise up. You can see, and to inscribe them on the doors of our houses. And here it reminds us of that reward, which in the Bible is directly, remember, this is from the book of Deuteronomy. The children of Israel are standing at the banks of the Jordan River, and they're looking at the holy land of Israel. Lema Yerbu, that your days and the days of your children on the land that God swore to your ancestors to give them will be as many as the days of the heavens are above the earth. We're meant to understand from this that good living is rewarded with goodness. The last paragraph really talks about the tzitzit. And here we have, I don't have my talit down here, shoot. Let's go back a few to talk specifically about some practical things. Here on the page, just before we get to the Shema, we have the prayer for God's love, God who chooses us in love. We're going to talk about loving God in all of this, and we remind ourselves that God has also loved us. But we say, "V'havienu l'shalom me'arba kanfot," bring us in peace and safety from the four corners of the earth. And we gather symbolically the four corners of our tzitzit together. We hold them in our left hand. There's actually a specific custom to hold them in your left hand, not in your right hand, regardless of whether you're a lefty or a righty. To fill in, the hands are different whether you're a lefty or a righty. But because this is a matter of kol levavcha, with all of your heart, you hold the tzitzit on the side of your body with your heart. Your left side is the side with your heart. So you hold the tzitzit in your left hand, all together. And the by the way, some people's hearts are not on the left side of their body. There's a very, very small percentage of people whose hearts are on the other, are placed differently within their bodies. I believe it's a basically non-threatening, non-pathological variation in human development. Even they hold it in their left hand. Okay, so even if you know that you're that kind of person, you still hold it in your left hand. Okay. And then the idea is twofold. One is to see them, and one is to kiss them. So the word tzitzit is mentioned 3 times in this paragraph. Make tzitzit, 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 and on each of those, you're supposed to kiss the tzitzit. I think for newcomers, I want to say, people who are learning later on, kids who start to learn this when they're teenagers, this feels weird. What? You kiss them? Those knots, those things, right? You take this thing and you kiss this rope? What? I mean, it seems weird, right? Like if we're thinking about it, honestly, like try to explain that to somebody who knows nothing about this. Well, we take these knotted strings that we have and we wear them on this big piece of cloth. And then we hold them in our hands and kiss them 3 times. Okay, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm not trying to be disparaging. I'm just trying to say it can seem weird. Here, I'm going to give some advice. To become a good davener, you need to be comfortable doing things that other people don't do. The vast majority of people don't do this. They don't sing out loud, sway back and forth, close their eyes and mumble words and kiss knotted cords and things. I mean, people don't do that. So you have to become comfortable doing things that are symbolic gestures and accepting the value, the profound value to you of doing these symbolic gestures. and let the watchers be damned, right? Like, I don't care. I put the talit over my head, I wrap it around me, I bow very deeply, I bring my hands up at the end of tefillah. I mean, I do these things that, like, other people don't do that stuff. Like, what are you doing? You're doing weird stuff. Why are you doing all that stuff? Yeah, because it's not weird. It's just not ordinary. What it is very thoughtful, carefully selected symbolic gestures. They create an inner dialogue and an inner script and a path which my intellect and emotions and spiritual being can walk as a matter of practice. This is not just a nothing kind of gesture. This is the raising up of internal energy and the focusing of it in front of you and the holding of tremendous power directly in front of you. That's important to me. That's a reflection of something which I'm doing internally. So the kissing of the tzitzit, don't just go, you kiss your lover that way? No. I mean, you don't have to make out with the tzitzit, but but be expressive in your gestures. Allow your spiritual gestures to be expressive. Kiss the tzitzit. Look at them. When it says, Ureitem otam, and you shall look at them. Look at them. Really take the time to look at them. Allow that moment to be whole, holistic, overwhelming, dominant, the only thing that you're thinking about in those moments. That's how these gestures work. You do them, you invest them with deep meaning, and they help to kavanize you, to clarify your focus. The last thing I want to say about this paragraph is the words of the text of the Bible end here. Asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, I took you out of the land of Egypt, liot lachem lelohim, to be your God, ani Adonai Elohecha, I am the Lord your God. Period, end of sentence. The word emet is not a part of the Torah text. We add it to the end. When you are saying this paragraph, you are supposed to end by saying, I am the Lord your God, truth. When there is a minyan, and you have not added these three words, because you want the total number of words in the Shema to add up to the number 248. If you didn't say El Melech Ne'eman, you only have 245. Therefore, you have to repeat these last three words, Adonai Elohechem Emet. Again. That is why the minyan leader, randomly out of the middle of nowhere, it's not random and out of the middle of the nowhere. It's a kind of mystical, a mystical notion that the words of this tefillah are incomplete. You've only done 245 out of the 248 things you need to do to close this loop. So the loop is not yet closed, right? A circuit that's almost closed is not quite closed. So you've got to have that many words. Now, why that many words? 248 is a great number to know for Jewish cocktail party quizzes. 248, according to tradition, is the number of distinct limbs and organs in the body. Bones, limbs, and organs. There's 248 parts of the body. This is not anatomy class, okay? 248. What is 613 minus 248? Why, of course, it's 365. See how that works? 360, half of the 613 is the days of the year, and half of the 613 are the limbs of the body. So it's as if every day of the year is saying, don't sin on me. And it's as if every limb of the body is saying, use me for a mitzvah. $365 negative commandments, 248 positive commandments. So that notion that you would want to keep that number complete is why we add this to the end. Adonai Elohechem emet. That lets everybody know that that tefillah is over. Just real quickly, I'll let you know, the reason we add emet here is an interesting little midrash on another piece of scripture, which is, do you remember, it's part of the Torah service. We say, Ve'atem hadvekim badonai Elohechem chayim kulchem hayom. We say that right before we start saying the aliyot during the Torah service. And we announce the page and we call up the Rishon, right? What that line means is it's very kind of complicated. Honestly, it's this weird notion where atem hadvekim, you who cling to God, chayim kulchem hayom, you will all live. Right? It's this notion that clinging to God gives you life. But if you look at the text, ve'atem hadvekim badonai Elohechem. Atem is the same letters as the word emet. So you who attach to Adonai Elohechem the word atem is how we get adding emet to the end here, is a way of fulfilling another passage within the scriptures. Now, one last thing I want to do is I want to talk about these adjectives. Most of you all, I think, have been in shul when I did the chanting for these. Yes? No? Yes? No? Okay. So there's a wonderful little chant, and part of the master class is to not just understand the tefillot a little better and how they flow, but also to develop our davening technologies, the different ways in which we can work our brain and spiritual life to change us. And one of them is by chanting. Chanting is a really, really powerful thing. It vibrates and moves your whole body. You emphasize fewer words and repeat them over and over again. So it allows you to focus more deeply each time through. It's like peeling away layers. You say it once, you say it again, and you get to a deeper and deeper and deeper place. The sounds and the words start to create neurological pathways within your mind, and it literally vibrates and massages your whole head with the vibrations that you say, and you feel better. There's a whole range of physiological things that happen when you chant. And this is true whether you understand the words or not. So I would like you to understand the words, but I'm going to say something kind of crazy here, but it's not always important to know what the words mean. to derive the meditative and spiritual benefit of tefillah. What? Yeah, that's right. You don't always have to know what you're saying. So here's the chant. At the end here, there are 15 words. Yatziv emet, Yatziv, Nachon, Kayam, Yashar, Ne'eman, Ahuv, Chaviv, Nechmad, Na'im, Nora, Adir, Mitukan, Mikubal, Tov, and Yafeh. 15 words which describe Hadavar Hazeh, this thing, meaning the Shema, the words that we read just up above us, the Torah itself, Aleinu Leolam Va'ed, forever and ever. So this teaching, these words which we have in front of us, are constant, well-founded, enduring, righteous, trustworthy, beloved, cherished, desirable, pleasing, awe-inspiring, majestic, well-ordered, established, good, and beautiful, and so are incumbent upon us forever. It's a closing acceptance of all of what the Shema has been. Love God, do these mitzvot, mezuzah, tefillin, tzitzit, tefillah, remembering the Exodus from Egypt. And all of that, the acceptance of that, and the recitation of the Shema, we believe, is all of these synonym words for good. It's good, constant, enduring, righteous, trustworthy, beloved, desirable, majestic, ordered, established, right? All these amazing things. Here's the chant. Here's how it goes. First, we say Emet a couple of times, and then we recite through all of the others. Emet, Emet, Emet ויציב ונכון וקיים וישר ונאמן ואהוב וחביב ונחמד ונעים ונורא ואדיר, מתוקן ומקובל וטוב ויפה, הדבר הזה עלינו לעולם ועד. That's the whole thing through, and then we repeat. Emet, a little faster. Emet. Here we go. Emet ויציב ונכון וקיים וישר ונאמן ואהוב וחביב ונחמד ונעים ונורא ואדיר ומתוקן ומקובל וטוב ויפה, הדבר הזה עלינו לעולם ועד. Join me if you can. Emet, Emet, Emet ויציב ונכון וקיים וישר ונאמן ואהוב וחביב ונחמד ונעים ונורא ואדיר ומתוקן ומקובל וטוב ויפה, הדבר הזה עלינו לעולם ועד. So to be able to do that, of course, hinges on a couple of things. One is, again, being willing to kind of mess up and kind of look, a little different or whatever, or to chant. I mean, most, people aren't into chanting, but get into it, right? That's my advice. The other is, it requires kind of really working these words. V'yatzi, v'nachon. You have to over-pronunciate so that you don't get tongue-tied and trip over your own mouth muscles. It requires thoughtful, present breathing, or you will run out of breath. V'yatzi v'nachon v'kayam v'yashar v'ne'eman v'ahu v'chaviv v'nechmad v'naim v'nora v'yadir u'metukan. It requires that you jump in a little earlier on u'metukan, u'mekubal, because they're a little bit different, because they start with the letter mem. And that you breathe in deep before hadavar hazeh, because you're going to have to go up high for aleinu, and you'll need the breath. So it requires presence, thoughtfulness, precision, careful breathing, articulation of the words in your mouth. It's a very physical process to chant like this. And then my advice is to do it at least 3 times. Once is not enough, twice is just 2. 3 makes a pattern. Not just a
Rabbi?
segment. Yes, ma'am.
Stupid question. Do we do this part? Because I really like that. I like what you just sang. It has, there's a rhythm, there's a cadence, and it adds to the service. But do we do this?
So I have I've introduced it on Shabbos morning a few times. I don't every time, but I come back to it probably a handful of times I've been there. I'll probably try to step it up a little bit now that I've brought it into the class too. There's a couple of different chants that I've tried to bring. One also for the beginning of the Ashrei that I think is really nice and very easy to learn. But I'm going to bring it in more. I really am. I didn't grow up chanting. The chazan at my synagogue was a classical chazan. My training at the seminary was not in chanting. I learned about it later, and the truth is I learned about it as a musician, where choruses, refrains, reprises, repetitions, return to simple themes over and over and over again, deepening complexity of layers as you get deeper and deeper into it, jam music that repeats over and over again, that allows for subtle variation within, that requires you to be present and playing with the other people. It taps into very universal musical human stuff.